Welcome to Heartland for Children's Let's Talk About It podcast, where we provide education and resources for family matters in Polk, Highlands, and Hardee Counties. We're so glad that you've joined us. So now, let's talk about it.
Good afternoon. My name is Kadian Parchment. I'm with Heartland for Children, and welcome to Let's Talk About It podcast. Today I have with me
Amanda Wilson. I'm with the Department of Children and Families.
And we are so excited to be here today because we are going to be speaking to you guys about Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month, which is in the month of January every year. And so we want to dig a little bit deeper into what human trafficking is and kind of some of the trends that we see around trafficking and spread awareness about the importance of this topic.
Yep. So let's talk about it.
All right. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about kind of our roles in our duties as it relates to human trafficking in our community.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Amanda Wilson. Like I said, I'm with the Department of Children and Families. With the department, I serve as the Community Development Administrator. I've been with the department for 17 years. And I know, exciting, right? Almost 18 years, which in our world, it's like you're a dinosaur. Yeah. You don't really exist around these parts with that many years. But anyway, part of my role in the community is building relationships with our partners. With that, a lot of prevention work, like, you know, our partners at Heartland for Children. And I serve in a role of prevention as our human trafficking task force for the circuit here, Circuit 10, which is Hardee, Highlands, and Polk counties. Kadian serves as my co-chairman here on the Circuit 10 task force.
Right, yeah.
That's our roles
Yeah, so I'm with Heartland for Children, like I stated before. My title now is Resiliency Coordinator, but I did start off at DCF about 15 years ago and was in and supervised the unit, what was referred to at that time as the institutional unit. Mm-hmm. And in that role, we did all the human trafficking cases for Polk, Highlands, and Hardee Counties. Mm-hmm. So that's really when I got my first taste of human trafficking and kind of what it was doing in our community and the investigation piece of that. And really just been in the task force since its inception, and now currently co-chairing with Amanda as we move forward with just awareness and community involvement and making sure that everybody understands how vital this is to making sure that our kids and our communities are safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about awareness, I feel like, you know, people hear about human trafficking happening and think it believes it may happen, but not necessarily hear. That's what we hear a lot in within our task force, in our communities, right?
Yeah. I feel like, so first let's start off. What is human trafficking?
Good point to start. Well, there's two components, right? Sex trafficking and labor trafficking, two major components to human trafficking. One of the primary components, the majority is sex trafficking, commercial sex trafficking, and it's force, fraud, or coercion of forced sex acts. And for people over the age of 18, there has to be that force, fraud, or coercion component. However, we deal in child welfare, like we're saying, and if you're under the age of 18, there doesn't have to be a proven force, fraud, or coercion if there are sex acts being performed as, sexual exploitation. Yeah. So that's the sexual.
Yeah, it's kind of understood that some element of that has taken place.
If
you're under the age of 18 especially, and so you really don't have to prove that in court. However, we try to educate kids that there's some element, there's some grooming that takes place that has one of those elements within it. And so when we talk about the commercial aspect of it, because it's CSEC, which is this commercial sexual exploitation of a child, the commercial part means that there's some kind of exchange. And so whether that's monetary exchange or exchange for a place to live or exchange for goods or hairstyles, that exchange piece is really what makes the difference with that commercial aspect of human trafficking. And quite frankly, it happens in our communities.
It does.
And our hope is that we won't turn into a community where it's very prevalent because prevention is a big component of that. And thankfully, we have great working relationships with local law enforcement and state law enforcement, and can be able to really enforce those efforts to prevent human trafficking, but it is a component that affects all of us.
It's definitely happening. And I mean, we've seen it. You said you've investigated. Every year we have started investigating, I want to say between 2007 and 2010. It just got, we just started pushing, even though we know slavery and this trafficking has been going on for centuries. Really, it's becoming, more wide known, and there's been a push and some advocacy for it in, really in the 2000s, and it really just got, I think Human Trafficking Awareness Day, which is January 11th, by the way. I almost said tomorrow, but this may not air before January 11th. But January 11th every year we recognize as Human Trafficking Awareness since 2007. And since then, we actually implemented the National Human Trafficking Awareness, or the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And there have been thousands of identified victims on the national line, and then in the state of Florida, about 17,000 identified victims. And in fact, the state of Florida ranks constantly number 3 in our nation for human trafficking victims being identified. Right. So, when we talk about, is it happening here? It's definitely happening here. It's happening here in Polk County, in Hardee County, in Highlands County. So there's definitely no question about it. You've seen the victims when you were. Oh, absolutely. And yours are just child victims, the ones that we've worked with, you and I personally. Correct. However, there are more than just child victims in our.
And so it is modern day slavery. Mm-hmm. There's more people enslaved now than any other time in the world history. Mm-hmm. And we're not just talking about just a U.S. issue, it's a global issue. Yeah. And so it's something that, even though it's global, it still affects people within our backyards. Mm-hmm. And so even though we delve mainly in child welfare, we've had the opportunity over the last several years to work very closely with law enforcement on their human trafficking prevention stings and operations, just to kind of have that upfront intervention piece with some of the recovered victims. And so that's another really vital part of this is collaboration amongst agencies, amongst law enforcement, child welfare, because it takes a village. And that village also includes the professionals involved. And so we are fortunate to have that collaboration within our community. But like Amanda said, it is something that's prevalent. Now, Amanda, clarify for me, because I know I've spoken to people within the community, and they always come under the assumption that there's a dark dungeon and the kids are being locked away there, like, and that's the only form of
the movie Taken.
Like the movie Taken.
Like they're kidnapped in the middle of wherever.
Is that the only way in which people are trafficked?
No. That's like a very, like, I want to say, I don't want to quote percentages, but I think it's like less than 1% or 10% or something, a very, very small percentage where people are actually unknown taken and things like that. But yeah, it's happening to, usually, like you said, there's some grooming that happens. It's usually someone that may be known. It happens in families, familial situations. There are unfortunately, the people that we work with are considered at risk for it, because you're looking for love and someone to care for you and things that you haven't had, like money and material things and stability. And oftentimes the perpetrators of this crime go after the vulnerability and try and establish that stability, and I'll give you this and I'll give you that, or and then the control takes over, and that's what happens. So usually it's a good relationship, and that's what makes it hard, because they think they're in a good thing and they're getting things that they've never had before, and at first it feels really good, and a lot of times it still feels good even after it hurts, because we know the dark side to that is abuse and sexual exploitation and forced labor and everything else. So no, it's not like you see in the movies, or like people think you're shackled up in a dungeon. Yeah. It's not like that. It's happening to our
Kids who are going to
kids
school
who are
every
going
day.
to school every single day. So what are some of those signs you can look for to know for our community? Because this is what it's for, right? What would be signs or indicators that someone may...
Yeah, so when we're looking at behavioral changes within someone, then that's a really big indicator, because if we have a child who we know financially cannot afford very expensive items or new grooming techniques, like nails and expensive hairstyles, and they're very secretive about how they're able to afford those things. They don't have an income, cell phones, walking around and now have a new boyfriend or have tattoos that... Traffickers are branding our boys and girls. And so they may have a tattoo with a rose or a star or money sign or that says daddy or has cherries. Those are all signs. The gangs are using this as a form of income too. So if you see a child who's favoring a certain color and also very secretive, leaving, running away frequently, leaving for long periods of time and not saying where they're going, then those are some signs where we want to say, oh, red flag, let's kind of pay attention to this. We're not saying that every teenager who's sneaky is being trafficked, because we know they're teenagers, but there are definitely some signs that we want to look out for of, especially if you're in the medical field and you're seeing a child who's coming in with frequent pregnancies or STDs or marks and bruises on their bodies, using substances. Those are all some indicators of what's going on here, and we need to dig a little deeper. As we know, we're all mandated reporters in the state of Florida, so when we do see those indicators, we definitely want to take action.
Yeah, and I would just want to take it a step further beyond child, because I know we always go to child, but adults too, at the ER, when you come across, or anywhere, but I'm just thinking of responding to medical situations, people who seem fearful to look you in your eye, to talk about their personal situation. If they don't have ID or legal documents, if they're not able to identify themselves appropriately, those would be signs and indicators that something may be going on there. And
you bring up a good point, because oftentimes we'll see the traffickers with that trafficked person and not allow them to speak for themselves. So would you like something to drink? They're not allowed to answer. They're not making eye contact. Right. They're avoiding that
He's
one-on-one
going to answer
time.
for me, or she's going to answer for me.
Right. And so another good point that you bring up, Amanda, are traffickers always males?
No.
Right?
Yeah, there's traffickers, while I would say the majority male, but there are women traffickers, men traffickers, and women and men victims, and boy and girl victims. We've seen the whole gamut.
Yeah, and oftentimes there's a hierarchy within that trafficking organization. So you may have the pimp, and then you may have what they refer to as the bottom, which is kind of like HR recruitment. And that person will go out and recruit other boys and girls for trafficking, and just kind of be like the madame over those victims. And so sometimes you may not see that male or that dominant person over a younger victim. It may be a female. It may be somebody within their age group where you're saying, well, they're just cousins or they're older sisters. And it could be that that's the bottom who is actually monitoring and making sure that they're staying in line. And so if your gut is telling you that something's not right, then you probably should follow up on it safely, though. That's important. Yeah,
you don't want to get yourself or anyone else involved into an unsafe situation where things may be not safe for you or anyone else.
Right. So we were just talking about some of the warning signs, kind of things that we could look out for. But how are traffickers getting involved and in contact with people anyway?
So I guess back to what we were saying, oftentimes they may know, right? I think you talked about like cousins, friends. I know this person, if you have one person, the bottom person who knows or is involved, then it's word of mouth, or they're actually using online techniques, games. Your kids love the gaming and everything. The games, the apps. Have you heard of, you may not have heard, but there are a lot of apps that seemingly are inconspicuous that our kids play on, or even some of the game Roblox. I know a lot of people know about Roblox. It's one of the dangerous apps that traffickers can access our kids through the chat functions. If you have the chat functions enabled, your child is susceptible to being vulnerable to a trafficker contacting them and building a relationship with them. There are very seemingly innocent ways that traffickers can engage with kids, and then they're really smart individuals that can sense the vulnerability and can sense the need for the things that they, can target and provide. So
yeah,
I think that's a huge way. Online,
yeah,
phones, internet,
absolutely
dangerous.
So when we think about just that lure, right? I'm going to build that friendship on social media, in real life. Oftentimes our kids don't realize that 5,000 friends that they have on social media, how many of them do they really know in real life? And how many people are liking your posts or inboxing you just to kind of lure you in, to build those relationships, to eventually kind of see how they can manipulate the situation. And so I always advise parents to just be aware of who your kids are interacting with on social media, in real life. Take off some of those geolocating features on social media that your kids may have on Snapchat, where a trafficker could say, "Oh, we always end up at the same place. It's meant to be." In reality, they just befriended your child on social media and now is using geolocating to track them and kind of develop that relationship. And so when we look at the stages of human trafficking, it's that grooming, it's that lure, it's that going in and then doing favors and just building relationships. And then there's that payback stage. And so after I've done all this stuff for you, I've become your everything, you owe me something.
Yep.
And unfortunately, that stage always comes along. There's no rhyme and reason to it. It's not like there's a formula of 3 months for this, 2 months for that, but it definitely comes back around after they felt like they've built up enough rapport with that victim to now manipulate them and use them for their own means. And again, like Amanda said, that could be a family member. That could be a neighbor. That could be the boyfriend who notices that this young person at school doesn't have many friends and want to take care of that relationship. And so there's a lot of different ways in which traffickers interact with our kids, but we will say that online and familial relationships are really highly on the list. And it's not very often that you see just random pick up on the side of the street kind of trafficking situations. Not saying that it doesn't happen, but that relationship building definitely plays a huge role in someone being trafficked.
Yep, it's definitely part of the stages. So be aware. And I know we mentioned it is happening here. People don't like to believe it's happening in your backyard, but it actually is. And so I just wanted to share that we do have some numbers. We just have rolled into 2023. And in the year of 2022, we had 81 reported intakes for child victims, children. This is just children here in our local area that were reported as human trafficking victims. 26 of them were verified to be human trafficking victims, and that included 5 labor trafficked. So it's children. So it's definitely happening, sex and labor.
Are you talking about, when you say our community, Central Florida?
No, our community, Polk, Hardee, and Highlands County. And so this very small community, and actually we didn't have any verified in Hardee and Highlands the last year. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but we definitely were able to verify the ones here. The 26 were here in Polk County. And there were 31, which makes it a total of 57 of the 81. So the majority that had some sort of indicator. Can't quite prove, can't quite verify it, but there were some indicators. So we know it may be in one of the stages there, but we can't quite prove it yet.
Right. So I know we've touched a lot on sex trafficking, but I heard you say that you have 5 verified cases of labor trafficking with children. And so when we think about labor trafficking, which is another component of human trafficking, we're talking about working for little or no pay. We're talking about working extended hours, not having your legal documentation at hand, sometimes being given the most demeaning jobs on the job site, or having to live in cramped and dismal conditions. And so unfortunately, when we talk about just our population that we serve, which is the children, you have 5 kids who weren't having a childhood and were made to work
Basically forced servitude.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But like Amanda said earlier, Florida always ranks in the top 3 along with California and Texas because of that agriculture, because of that labor trafficking too. So even though sex trafficking is a major component in human trafficking, labor trafficking is really something that we see because we have a lot of hotels, we have a lot of service industries, we have construction, agriculture, where unfortunately, whether you're a U.S. citizen or even a foreign person, you could be lured into that trafficking component. When we talk about domestic trafficking, those are U.S. citizens, but there is also just trafficking in general, where maybe somebody who may be here legally, but didn't realize what they were getting themselves into when they got here.
Right. So it's happening definitely here in our backyard. It's labor, it's sex. And so what do we do, and how do you get involved? What can they do, Kadian?
Well, I mean, there's simple things that you could do. Not everyone is going to say, I want to be a speaker, I want to be an advocate, which is great. We are always looking for additional people to join the task force. And so when we talk about our local task force, we've been in existence, I think, since 2010, if I'm not mistaken. And it really encompasses our 3 areas of Polk, Highlands, and Hardee Counties. And so within that task force, we have law enforcement, we have community partners, education folks, people within DCF, within Heartland for Children.
We have our faith-based community. Have just concerned community members. We do have some legislative representation. We have different providers.
Can you go back just to say sorry?
Legislative.
Faith-based community.
You're good.
We have our faith-based community. We have legislative representation. We have community partners and providers that provide resources and support to traffickers of human, to victims and survivors of human trafficking. Like locally here, we have really good relationship with One More Child that has a strong
trafficking program.
Yes.
And
Selah Freedom that has a really good program also. So they are part
and
of
those prevention efforts, the opportunity for the task force to speak to different community groups, meet, and to collaborate and talk about different strategies and trends that we're seeing statewide really gives an opportunity to strengthen our base here within our Circuit 10 environment. And so that's wonderful news. And a part of being the task force is that we have what coming up, Amanda?
An annual symposium that will take place on January 19th at the Lakes Church in Lakeland. It will be 8:30 a.m. Doors will open. We'll get started at 9 a.m. and we will go until about 3:30 p.m. There will be different breakout or workshops on different trafficking subjects, and a great learning opportunity, prevention, awareness, taking action for our entire community, free and open to everyone in our community. Educators, community members, parents, teens, children. It's really, really important to get not only the awareness, but also what you can do to take action against this crime. So we are excited because this will be the first time we'll be in person since 2020. We had our symposium January 2020, then you know what happened in March 2020. And so the last couple of years we've been virtual, so we're excited that we'll be in person again.
And it should be a really great day of information sharing, networking, and like Amanda said, totally free.
Yes.
And so
because of some wonderful sponsorships from our great partners like Heartland for Children, some of our faith-based churches have sponsored, provided some sponsorships for us. So we're really, really grateful to our community that cares about what's happening here, and so we're able to provide it for free.
Yeah.
It's always been free thus far.
Yeah, and we hope to continue that. So that's a possibility. If you want to join the Circuit 10 Human Trafficking Task Force, you could reach out to myself or Amanda for us to provide you with additional information. But then be simple things like having a conversation with your kids, checking their phones, checking their social media, talking to your friends about what's going on as it relates to human trafficking so they can educate their kids. Going on social media and sharing a post that we've posted on the Circuit 10 Human Trafficking page. And so simple things that really just kind of help to combat it. But one of the main things is also just using your instincts, right? If you're at a rest stop and you see something that does not seem right, again, some of those indicators of not making eye contact or seeming like looking disheveled, then safely gather information and contact law enforcement. We're not saying to approach that person or run the car down or grab that victim, but we definitely are eyes and ears out there as a community to help kind of just lead law enforcement in the right direction when it's done safely. Remember, safety is paramount. And so if you could safely gather information, then do that. There's a ton of different apps too that help with hotel recognition and where you could post just your vacation pictures based on the hotel that you're at to help law enforcement identify victims based on the surroundings in that picture. And so simple things like that really just kind of help with the efforts.
Yep. We have our National Human Trafficking hotline, which is 1-888-373-7888. Again, 1-888-373-7888. Or, like Kadian said, your local law enforcement will be more than helpful if you reach out to them. If you see anything, if you see something, say something.
And then how do people protect themselves?
That's a very good question. So I am careful when I'm posting, like you said, if I'm posting things, if I'm vulnerable and I'm giving my location to everywhere I go, if I'm going by myself and
parking places.
Be aware of your surroundings, taking partners, especially, as adults, when we go out, if I'm going to even grocery store, things like that, I'm, parking in lighted places and communicating with the people that I know. And when I'm meeting someone, I'm sharing with my trusted friends,
where you're going,
what I'm doing, and things like that. And I guess not only on initial encounters, but ongoing what that relationship is like. Because sometimes, like we said, building the relationships, sometimes when we're in things, we may not be able to see or recognize signs that may be red flags, especially if we're a little vulnerable ourselves. So those things I think are very important. And so if you feel like you may be victimized, or if you are, experiencing signs or indicators of being a human trafficking victim, then speak with a trusted adult, someone that you trust. You can contact local law enforcement. You can do all the things, or ask someone to do all the things for you that you may feel like you may not be able to do, like contact law enforcement, or you may be afraid to do sometimes.
And always keep in mind too, if you are being victimized right now, that you are worthy and that you are loved. And I know a lot of times traffickers will say, well, no one's going to want you after this, or you're used up, no one cares about you. That's not true. And so just reach out, because love does not make you feel less than. And if that's what you're feeling, even though, like Amanda said, sometimes it's not always bad, sometimes it's a great feeling, but other times in your heart you know that this isn't the way that you want to live, then even if it's writing a note and leaving it in the bathroom, or talking to a trusted teacher or friend, if you don't feel comfortable going to law enforcement, just get a way to get some kind of indicator to someone so that we could reach out and get you the help that you need. Because there is help available out there, and there's definitely people who care about you.
And love you. That won't hurt you.
Yeah. So it was wonderful speaking to you, Amanda. Yay. We're super excited again about our symposium coming up on the 19th of January. Remember, keep in mind that January is Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. And so any effort.
That's why we wear blue.
That's why we have on our blue, because that is our color. So even the efforts of wearing blue and telling somebody, hey, do you know the reason I have on blue today? Mm-hmm. And giving them a little bit of information is also helping in the effort to combat human trafficking. And so we are thankful that we have the opportunity from Heartland podcast, Let's Talk About It, to even have this discussion and really spread awareness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Heartland for Children's Let's Talk About It podcast. There is a great need for foster families who are willing to open their hearts and homes to teens, sibling groups, and children with special needs. To learn more, check out the description for resources or visit heartlandforchildren.org.